Welcome back to the Now Morning Show, 30 minutes past the hour of 7 o'clock. And of course, as the nation goes to the polls today, we've seen the Commonwealth Observer Group deployed to monitor and ensure fairness and transparency for our parliamentary elections 2025. Joining us this morning in studio is Evarist Bartolo, the chairperson of the Commonwealth Observer Group and former Foreign Affairs Minister of Malta. Good morning.
Thank you. Good morning.
And Lindiwe, Maleleka, political advisor of the Commonwealth Secretariat. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here this morning. It's a pleasure to have you both on set. Before we get into anything, aside from all of, the nitty-gritty, how are you enjoying Trinidad and Tobago? I'll start with you.
In the days that we've been here,
yes,
we've met a lot of friendly, kind people, which shows that even during election time you can have your humanity and remember that you're a human being.
Yes.
And what I've liked a lot is the message that has come across. You know that as human beings, one of the biggest challenges we have is to live together.
Yeah.
In the world in general and in countries in particular. This is especially more difficult during election time because we tend to stress more what divides us than what unites us. And in competitive democracies, you want to show how different you are to the others, whereas in fact, there's a lot of similarity.
Oh, definitely.
And what is nice is that there have been moments, even during this tense election, when rivals have hugged each other and embraced each other and passed the message that whatever happens today, tomorrow, we all have to live together.
Yeah.
So that is, I think, a powerful message that has come across.
It's definitely a powerful message, and it's good to see that you've been able to get some of that Trinbagonian hospitality and love. Lindiwe, what has your experience been like so far?
Yes, no, thank you. As the chair has pointed out, we've really received quite a warm welcome here. And the stakeholders that we've been engaging with, they've been, forthcoming with information to give us the political and electoral landscape in the country as the Trinidad and Tobago prepares itself for this election. So it has been quite refreshing, as he says, to see political parties embrace each other. There was one place where we went, we saw that political parties were actually, their offices were on the same floor. We're like, this is refreshing to see.
See, there we go. Great things happening right here in Trinidad and Tobago. Now, before we get in further deep into, let's say, your initial assessments and so much more, let's get a little bit into the role and responsibilities of the Commonwealth Observer Group. Chair, if we could start with you, can you just briefly explain to us?
As the name shows, it is an observer group. It does not go to countries to conduct elections or to tell them what to do without understanding what is going on. And we've been to many different countries where basically what we're doing is learning from each other. We must remember that democracy is a work in progress. Everywhere it needs to be improved, everywhere it needs to be worked at. So what we do is we learn from each other. So we visit places, especially when there is time, and in this case there hasn't been time because it has been a snap election. So you go before, you try to find out how the landscape is, you prepare for it, then you're actually observing what is going on, and then we carry out our assessment and make our report. But basically it is sharing our experiences, learning from each other's mistakes, and trying to take this forward, because it's very important that elections are seen, not just seen, but are actually free and fair, so that citizens do not lose their trust. It's very important. We are living at a particular time in the world today where unfortunately democracy is in retreat. And for us to regain that trust, we need to show citizens, and we need to show them, in fact, not just in words, that elections count and that your vote counts.
Something that's so important, and of course having your presence here is also going to give that reassurance, not just here but on a global scale, that we are continuing to push and continue with democracy throughout the world. Lindiwe, let's come back to you this morning. One of the things that Chair would have just mentioned would have been some of the initial assessments of the polls. What has that been like so far?
So far, we had an opportunity to observe the opening at the Queen's Royal College, and from what we've seen, the pre-poll procedures were followed meticulously. The management of the queues, that went smoothly, and the overall environment at the polling station seems to be quite smooth, and things running smoothly, voters being directed to where they are supposed to go, and no issues so far, nothing. And we hope that throughout the day, this will carry through. We really wish that will carry up to the end of the day.
Yeah, that sounds particularly intricate, because one of the things that may not necessarily cross one's mind is looking at the queues and the way that people are filing in. Would you be able to share with us maybe some key things that are looked at, or the procedures that are looked at by the Commonwealth Observer Group?
Yes. So when the group is on the ground, as you may be aware, we have quite a number of teams on the ground. We have deployed, first of all, to San Fernando and the neighboring constituencies. We have a team in Tobago, and we have a team here in Port of Spain. We have other teams in Eastern Trinidad. What they will be looking at in terms of the election day itself, they will be looking at the pre-poll procedures, first of all, whether the election officials, the polling staff, whether they are following the procedures as outlined in the manuals of the EBC. They will also be observing whether how the polling agents, that is the political party representatives or candidate agents, how they are behaving throughout the day. They will also be assessing how the security officials are managing things, whether they are unobtrusive throughout. They'll also be looking at the composition of the polling officials, whether there is gender balance among polling staff. Even for the voters, they'll be checking whether men and women, young people, they came out to vote, how the queues are being managed, and if issues are raised throughout the process. If a voter has a query, for instance, how that is being handled, or if a polling agent raises an issue, how that is managed, how quickly the election officials are responding to some of the issues that may come. Whether voters are being allowed to exercise their franchise. Are they able to vote? Are there any voters being turned away, and what is the reason for that? All those things we'll be looking into.
Those are a lot of things to look into, and especially with so many people, so much foot traffic happening at all the different constituencies and voting stations throughout Trinidad and Tobago. In light of that, how many observers have been deployed, Chair?
In terms of observers, we are 6, but then with the supporting team, we're 11, and we make sure that everyone works, so it's all hands on deck. And we are reaching all over the territory. As Lindiwe say, we have people also in Tobago, and that is very important. And as Lindiwe was saying, when we go even to the individual police station, we try to see the bigger picture. You know, are people allowed to be at peace with themselves while they are queuing? Have they come to the right polling station? Is the polling station accessible? We were very happy that this morning, when we went yesterday, we saw that there were, I think, 3 steps. This morning there were wooden ramps, so people who need to, either because of the wheelchair or because of your age, it was accessible. We were promised this, and this was delivered. We're very happy to say that.
Positive to hear that. One of the things I'm hearing from both of you as well is there is a key humanitarian aspect to this, which is being taken into consideration in what can admittedly be quite a frigid time. And I'm sure that aligns with the mandate of the Commonwealth Observer Group. Is that correct?
Yes, and we could see it in action this morning. People coming in. I would say that most of them were elderly people at that stage, coming in early. They were made to feel very comfortable there. And I would again stress this. Despite the tension, you see smiles, including from the agents of the parties. So you can do your work properly, I repeat this, and remain human. And we saw that.
And
May I just add that, overall in terms of what we're looking at is to assess whether or not Trinidad and Tobago is conducting these elections according to the standards for democratic elections to which the country has committed itself. This would include the national legislation, regional commitments, international commitments, Commonwealth and its charter, and based on that, we are able to make our assessments.
Now,
and of course, the Commonwealth, of course, seeks to be helpful to the country, and it would recommend some recommendations which are aimed at improving electoral processes, strengthening electoral processes, and at the end of this process, we will be issuing our report, which will highlight some of the key issues that the country will look into for future electoral processes.
Some post-election support that, of course, is needed as we continue to grow as a nation also. Now, can you walk us through the timeline of that? So after the general elections are completed here in Trinidad and Tobago, what happens then with your group moving forward?
Yes. So tomorrow, the chair will issue an interim statement on behalf of the group, highlighting the preliminary findings from today and, of course, from the days leading up to election day. We've been here since the 22nd of April, meeting with the various stakeholders and assessing the pre-election environment and what issues cropped up in the lead up to these elections. And the interim statement will cover all those aspects that we mentioned earlier in terms of what we look into, as I said, whether the elections are being conducted in line with the standards for democratic elections that this country has committed itself. We plan to issue this interim statement tomorrow afternoon. And in a few weeks, we will also now be issuing a comprehensive report that contains some of the recommendations recommending the strengthening of electoral processes where there is a need. And we will use that report to engage the various stakeholders in the post-election period. What the Commonwealth also seeks to do is to try to find ways of supporting member countries to implement observer recommendations. We have introduced what we call a whole of election cycle approach, where we seek to engage our member countries in the pre-election period, during election period, as we are doing now through observation, and in the post-election period is to use that report to now engage the stakeholders.
And Chair, let's bring you back into the conversation. In light of your experience after the issuance of the interim reports and the recommendations moving forward, do you see countries taking heed of this and implementing it in their elections as time goes on?
Yes, obviously it depends on the political will of the different countries. If the parties want to take it forward, they're going to take it forward. That is why it is important that when we come to a country like Trinidad and Tobago, and we've done this, is that you meet the different stakeholders. You meet the institutions, you meet, like we did, the EBC, we met the police, we met the different political parties, people involved in civil society, or for example, persons with disability. We met people from the media. We met someone who's monitoring also the ethical behavior of parties. Through that, we can also gauge what recommendations to make, because every country has its own specific reality. There are obviously international standards to follow, but every country has its own particular reality. In some areas, it has developed them much more than others. For example, I can tell you straight away that one of the things that have come across is the importance of regulating campaign financing. That is something which there is a need for, as has been expressed by some of the political parties, by the media, by the persons who are involved in monitoring political behavior.
It's interesting as you mention that, because that's one of the things that we've seen reported at in media, whether it be mainstream print and so much more when it comes to the financing regulation and so much more. So looking forward to seeing what the report is going to hold on that particularly. Now, again, going back with both of you and your experience, would you say there are any challenges when it comes to observation? We'll start with you, Chair, that you see regardless of the country that you go to.
Yes, but it also depends on your attitude. Obviously, we do not come to a country and self-righteously say, you must do this, you must do that, you're wrong at this, you're wrong at that. As I said, democracy is a work in progress, and we all need to learn from each other. It depends on the willingness of the country to take forward those recommendations or not. Where we usually are very worried is when there is so much tension and there is so much distrust that things can get out of hand and can become very violent, and then you can have a failed state. That is not the case.
No.
Yeah.
And one thing about Trinidad and Tobago, we definitely have a lot of love regardless of these situations that are happening. Lindiwe, what about you and your experience? Any particular challenges?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as the chair has mentioned, of course, you know, the choice of the chair for us is very important based on the experiences we've had in the past, where the election environment is a little bit tense, so to speak, and the chair would then play, you know, wear a different hat, a good officer's head, you know, to manage, you know, some of the challenges that crop up during the election observation process, and to really try to, you know, calm, you know, tensions. That has been the challenge for us, and of course, as he said, the biggest challenge is where we go to countries, you find still the same issues that were raised, let's say 5 years back when the observers were on the ground, still happening. And this is where now the Commonwealth is, you know, is trying to see how it can engage member countries to really take forward some of these recommendations. And perhaps just to mention that the Commonwealth heads of government themselves have acknowledged this, and they have encouraged that countries must establish domestic mechanisms that will help them to take forward the observer recommendations, so that, of course, we do recognize that the value and impact of observation really lies on the implementation of those recommendations.
Something that is so important. So in light of that, once this report is published, this is going to be available to the general public?
Yes,
yes,
of
it
course.
will become public. So the report will be shared with the government of Trinidad and Tobago, with the election management body in this country, with the various stakeholders that we've been meeting, including political parties, civil society organizations, and then in the end, it will be made available to Commonwealth governments, and then it will become public.
Because you see, one of the things that you would have mentioned there, and of course just going on with what the heads of governments are looking for to ensure that these observations are actually implemented, and we don't go to that situation of maybe how many years later it not happening, is once we are aware also as people as what these observations have been and what the recommendations are, we also can exercise our rights.
Now, that is where we can be helpful. As honest friends, if you have an honest friend and there's a hole in the street, that friend will tell you there's a hole in the street. If that friend doesn't tell you, then he's not a friend. And we want to be honest friends.
Yeah, and well, we're definitely friends here, that is for sure. And it's such a pleasure to have you with us in studio. But before we close our conversation, let's talk a little bit, if we can, very briefly, about the vision for democracy. It's clearly dear to both of your hearts, because to be here with us this morning, to be in Trinidad and Tobago, you would have come from your homes, you would have come from your lives, and so much more. What is your vision for democracy on a global scale?
Well, unfortunately, not only at the moment, but definitely at the moment, democracy is being weaponized against each other. You know, one of the biggest challenges, first of all, is that as a country, whoever we are, whether we're government, party, media, we are parts of a bigger whole. In election time, we tend to make the part bigger than the whole. So one of the biggest challenges is for us, those of us who are involved in political life, which means everyone, we must always remember that we are a part of a bigger whole and that we have a contribution to make. Then I think the biggest challenge that democracy is facing at the moment is, as we were saying before, the question of trust. Elections are just a small part of democracy. Going to vote once every 4 years or once every 5 years is just a small part of democracy. And if we want democracy to regain its trust, it cannot be just about political rights. It's also about social rights. It's also about economic rights, because we find it very convenient in the world. Part of the world says, we've taken people out of poverty, political rights, we still have to work on them a lot. Others say, we have political rights, freedom of expression, but then problems with housing, unemployment, poverty. The United Nations Declaration makes it very clear. We have to be free from fear and want. We can't be free from fear. We also need to be free from want. And in there, I think every country has to work at making democracy concrete, politically, socially, and economically. You cannot be unfree and well-fed, or well-fed, So free and fed.
Yeah.
That is the biggest objective of democracy.
Very important. All pillars need to come together. And Lindiwe?
Yes, indeed. I mean, we're seeing in recent years democratic backsliding, the attack on democratic institutions, and we really hope that key democratic institutions can be strengthened to uphold the principles and values that countries have committed to. And we hope that institutions can be strengthened to be able to conduct transparent, credible, and inclusive elections. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you so much for joining us this morning. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for also, of course, overseeing everything that's happening. And hoping that you get to enjoy a little bit of Trinidad and Tobago outside of the election period as well.
Thank you.
It's been